So you've been thinking that it's finally time to launch that passion project, side hustle, or expand your current business with a web platform, whether that is a project catalog, a membership site, digital downloads, or online courses. And because you're that kind of tech savvy person and love to do things yourself, you're exploring all those open source tools that you've heard so much about, like WordPress, Joomla, or Moodle, in order to make that happen. But before your vision becomes a reality, there's one critical decision that you're going to need to make, and that is choosing the right hosting service. It's not just a technical issue, it's an investment of your time and your money. And so you're going to want to make sure that you make the right choice the first time. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the best hosting options for open source apps if you are a DIY tech savvy creator. I'm going to cover what you absolutely need, what you should absolutely avoid, and I'm going to make some challenges to some popular beliefs along the way. So stick around. I think that you're going to be surprised. I'm Garrett Fry, and this is a training video from OpenAppGuide.com. As a professional VFX artist working in games, feature film, animation, and commercials, and later as a global director of training and development, open source apps has been a critical part of enabling my success. From promoting myself and sharing tutorials online as an artist to developing HR and compliance trainings worldwide as a director of training, I've seen firsthand what these tools can do. My goal is to lower the barrier so creators like you can unlock the power of these open source platforms and build something that lasts. So let's go ahead and get started. The hosting solutions that I'm going to be proposing to you in this training fits a particular profile, those who are tech savvy DIYers. So I thought it would be a good idea to quickly go over what it means to be a tech savvy DIYer and see if you fit the profile or if you aspire to fit the profile. You know, if you fit this profile, if you are comfortable with technology, that you easily navigate computers, operating systems, and various digital tools without needing a lot of help, that you're a self-taught learner. That means that you access YouTube, forums, documentation, and tutorials to figure out how to do things, that you have some basic troubleshooting skills. That means you can diagnose and fix common issues with software and systems, that you are accustomed to installing and configuring apps, if that be desktop applications or potentially web applications, that you are not a coder, but at the same time, you're not afraid of code. You may copy and paste or lightly tweak some code, some CSS, some config or snippets without fully writing it. That you're able to adopt to new tools quickly, eager to test new platforms, plugins, and services if they serve a useful purpose to you. That you're willing to put in the work if it's required to be able to learn a new system or application, and if you have big dreams. So if you feel like this profile fits you, or if you aspire to fit this profile, then you know that the solutions that I'm going to be proposing to you here are going to be the very best options for you. So to lay the proper foundation for our discussion, I wanted to just go over a couple of terms. The first one here is managed hosting. A managed hosting service is where the provider handles the server setup, the maintenance, the security, and technical support for you. The other definition is unmanaged. That means that they give you full control over the server, but you're responsible for everything on it: maintenance, configuration, and troubleshooting. Under the managed category, you have shared hosting, you have virtual private servers or VPS, and you have cloud hosting. And this is the area that we're going to be spending all of our time under the managed category, because when you get into unmanaged servers, you're going to need a high level of expertise because you're just given some hardware and you're expected to install the base Linux operating system and the Apache web server and everything that goes along with it. And you get zero support on that unmanaged server. As a tech-savvy DIY creator, you could very well find yourself eventually where you're working with an unmanaged server, but right now that's outside the scope of the profile that I defined earlier. So now that these terms have been defined, I'd like to get deeper into the managed hosting plan options. And to help us visualize, I want you to think about hosting plans as if you're renting a moving truck. I'm sure that everyone has experienced this, that when you're looking at your house, it's really hard to tell the kind of truck that you're going to need in order to make that move. You don't want to reserve a truck that's going to be too small because it can't fit all of your stuff. While if you get a truck that's too large, that's also problematic because you're paying for extra room that you don't really need. Just like you'd expect from a moving company that you have small, medium, and large truck rental options, I'm defining for our discussion here shared hosting as the smallest option, virtual private server hosting as the medium option, and cloud hosting as the largest option. So let's start defining these categories in a very real sense. The first one is monthly visits. For shared hosting, it's up to 25,000. For VPS hosting, it's 25 to 100. In cloud hosting, it's 100,000 and above. With your hosting service, you're going to be able to host multiple websites. And for a shared hosting, that's going to be either 1 to 5 small sites. VPS hosting, 5 to 20 plus medium to high traffic sites. In cloud hosting, it's like 20 plus complex to custom apps. For storage, you're talking about 10 to 50 gigabytes for shared hosting. For VPS, 50 to 200, although that could be expanded at any time. And then cloud hosting, you're looking at 100 to multiple terabytes. There's actually a really big bump between shared and VPS hosting at this point because shared hosting is going to be using traditional hard drives, while VPS hosting is most likely going to be using SSD hard drives, which is going to dramatically increase the read and write speed of your website. So the next one is bandwidth, or the amount of data that is able to be transferred from your website to any of your users. So for shared hosting, that's around 500 gigabytes. Virtual private server, you're talking 1 to 5 terabytes. And cloud hosting, it's 5 plus terabytes, or they have the ability to auto scale that on demand. Now, nearly every website application is going to be using a database. So the database load is a consideration when picking your hosting plan, or the amount of information you have in your database. So for shared hosting, you're looking for light load on your database. VPS hosting, moderate to heavy. Cloud hosting, high, and supports complex database setups. So performance is probably the largest defining factor between these different hosting options. If you're using shared hosting, then you're literally sharing a server and its resources across multiple websites. So if somebody's website is going to be taking a lot of CPU time or RAM, that could potentially slow down your website. Now, it's up to the hosting provider to make sure that these shared resources are being distributed in the best possible way. And that really defines the difference between a great hosting service and a really bad one. Now, virtual private servers don't have that issue because they have their own dedicated resources like RAM and CPU. You'll often see that in the pricing pages of hosting providers as number of CPUs and amount of RAM dedicated to that particular hosting plan. That means no one has access to these resources except you. And if you're not using them, then they're just sitting there on the server just waiting for you. Whereas VPS hosting is a single server, cloud hosting is a little bit different. We're talking about a network of different servers, and your resources are distributed across these servers. Now, this particular setup of having networked cloud computers makes it really easy to scale your resources if there is a new demand being put on your web applications. And it will also load balance your web applications across the network in order to give you the best possible performance. Now, as your needs grow, you're going to want to be looking at how to scale the capabilities of your server. Each of these hosting options has a built-in scaling capability. So if you're talking about shared hosting, it's very, very limited, and you have a wall that you're going to hit. If you want to go beyond that wall, then you're talking about having to remove your website off of that shared hosting plan and getting a new plan like a virtual private server plan in order to put your website on. It's fairly easy to upgrade a virtual private server. You just go to your hosting provider and say, hey, I want a couple more CPUs, I want some more RAM, I need some more storage, and they will give you the upgrade. Now, potentially, you could get a spike in traffic that could overload your server, and people will no longer be able to access your web application. That's where cloud hosting really shines, is that you can set up these rules to auto allocate resources so that you never run into that issue. And the last area that we're going to be looking at for these hosting plans is your ability to customize the setup on the server. If you're using a shared hosting plan, you have very minimal controls of what you can actually do with that server to make customized setups for your open source applications. If you're using a virtual private server, then you have full root access and you can do all sorts of different custom configurations to accommodate your different open source applications. Now, cloud hosting also gives you this ability, but then adds in more complex multi-service deployments. So those are the specifications for our 3 different categories under managed hosting, but I neglected to say that there's actually one more category, and that is app hosting. Now, the graphic that I'm using here for app hosting is somebody on a bicycle. And just like you would never rent yourself a bicycle in order to move your belongings from one house to another, I personally can't recommend app hosting as a way of hosting any of your web applications. App hosting gives you access to a single application, and that is it. Typically, you'll see this on hosting providers for WordPress. This type of hosting is for very simple websites, and if ease of use is your goal, then you might as well just go with a Wix website anyways. So just a couple of things I want to point out here before we wrap up this slide, and that is when it comes to comparing different shared hosting plans from one service provider to another, it can be very difficult because there's nothing really quantifiable that they list there in terms of performance. They're not going to be listing how many CPUs or RAM that you have access to because those resources are shared across all the accounts that have access to that shared server. So that makes it kind of a black box when you're comparing these shared hosting plans, and you really have to rely on the reputation of that particular hosting provider. And lastly, there's actually quite a bit of pricing and feature overlap when it comes to virtual private servers and cloud hosting, which kind of blurs the line between these 2 different categories. So when you're checking out these different plans, you may find that there are some lower spec cloud hosting plans that have less features than higher end virtual private server hosting plans. Let me take a quick moment and tell you that OpenAppGuide.com has outlined 12 different project types. Each of these project types will have blueprints that lay out exactly what you're going to need to build the project, recommendations for the best open source applications, plugins, and services for that particular project, and training that's going to help you know how to build it all. Right now, if you head over to openappguide.com/vote and tell us which project you're most interested in, the project that gets the most votes will become our top priority for building more blueprints, recommendations, and training. If you want to shape what comes next and get the resources that you need to move forward, go vote now at openappguide.com/vote. All right, let's get back to our training. Now that we've broken down these different managed hosting plans, I want to talk more about shared hosting. When you're looking at these shared hosting plans across these different providers, you're going to see some really attractive pricing. In addition, you're going to be seeing some great features being highlighted that could lead you to think that this is all that you would possibly need. However, I'm going to be showing you that there are some deal breakers that make these plans not viable for tech-savvy DIY creators. The first deal breaker is just the number of sites that can be hosted with that shared hosting plan. As a tech-savvy DIY creator, you're going to have the core sites that you're wanting to be hosted, and it may fall within this range, but you're also going to have additional sites that you're going to use for testing and for staging, and you're going to be surprised how quickly you hit that wall on the limited number of sites that you can host. Along with that is the database limit. So they'll also limit you on the number of databases that you can have, which is usually in lockstep with the kind of sites that you have. It is pretty frustrating to think that if you wanted to try out a new open source application, that you've run out of your databases or the sites that you can have hosted, and now you have to buy a new shared hosting plan in order to do that. The next deal breaker is the limit of cron job intervals. So for shared hosting plans, they're going to be anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes. If you're not familiar with what cron jobs are, a cron job is an automated task scheduled to run at specific times. Your web application might be using cron jobs to trigger time-sensitive notifications or emails like password reset emails, order confirmations, real-time alerts, or communication between users. Having a 15 or 30-minute delay in this process could result in a pretty bad user experience. Some open source applications require you to have a 5-minute or even a 1-minute cron job interval in order to do its basic functions. Running a cron job every 10, 5, or 1 minute can be really processor intensive, especially if you're sharing resources with multiple people across a shared hosting environment. So you can understand why they put limits on the number or frequency of cron jobs. There's some pretty tight constraints when it comes to storage on these shared hosting plans, and there's no way to scale the amount of storage that you have. You'd be pretty surprised how quickly you use up this storage as you're adding more and more content to your web applications, and so that's a pretty big deal breaker. The next deal breaker is PHP, and specifically PHP versioning, configuration, and the number of extensions that are available to you. Open source applications have varying degrees of PHP version adoption, and in a shared hosting environment, you're often restrained to a particular version of PHP that's rolled out for the whole server. Now that could lead to incompatibility issues between the server and your open source software, or if a new version of PHP is getting rolled out to that shared hosting server, it could break your site. And that typically comes from a plugin that you've installed on your site that has been slow to update their code, or if you're maintaining a more legacy version of the application. In addition to not having the right PHP version that's going to work optimally for your open source application, you could have configuration issues as well. Every open source application has its own set of preferences or requirements for PHP configuration. That has to do with things like the maximum amount of memory that can be used by a script or the maximum file size that can be uploaded to your site. The last one has to do with access to different less common PHP extensions needed to run open source applications. If your shared hosting plan doesn't offer these extensions, then you just can't run those open source applications on that hosting plan. And this last deal breaker may be one that you have never thought about, and that is your ability to send emails out from that hosting plan. A lot of shared hosting plans will limit you to sending out 100 to 400 emails out hourly or 500 to 1,000 emails daily. So if you have a large email list and you're sending out a newsletter, that can be really difficult if you're sending something out that's time sensitive. It may take all day to send out, or it may take multiple days to get your newsletter out to your people. I know that these deal breakers, as I've described them, take the veneer off of these shiny, attractively priced shared hosting plans, and that is why I cannot recommend these hosting plans for tech-savvy DIY creators. So let's now talk about what it is that I do recommend, and I recommend that you get the cheapest virtual private server or cloud hosting plan that you can get. Now, this is going to give you the server specs that you need, unlock a lot of customization and features needed to run your open source applications optimally, and gives you the ability to scale as you grow. If you remember, there are some crossovers between pricing and features between VPS and cloud hosting that can blur the lines a little bit between these two categories. So let me tell you what you should be looking for in either of these types of plans. Usually the base server specs for the cheapest plans are 2 CPU cores, 2 to 4 gigabytes of RAM, and 50 to 100 gigabytes of SSD storage. This configuration meets the recommended, not just the minimum specifications of all the open source applications that I'm aware of. And because you've gone beyond the shared hosting plans, you have the ability to send unlimited emails for your newsletters, that you have the ability to set versioning, extensions, and configuration per application or per site that you're running. You'll have the unlimited number of sites and databases that you need, and some other benefits, which includes a static IP address that all your sites run from, which makes it easier for users, services, and search engines to connect and find your site. You're looking at reduced downtimes and fewer connection issues, and it's more likely that your newsletter emails will not be automatically marked as spam. You also get better security because your server is in a completely different environment from other websites. You also have the ability to scale the resources of your website as needed. Now in this video, I'm not going to be going over specific hosting plans from particular providers. I am going to recommend specific providers that I have used in the past and have a very high level of trust within the community in terms of service and performance. In the notes of this video, I am going to link to specific plans for each of these providers that I would recommend. So go ahead and click on those and explore all those different options. Now that I've given you this tech-savvy hosting guide for DIY creators, you have all you need to get started. If you're wanting to know how to set up open source apps on these hosting providers I listed, then head over to openappguide.com for more training. I'll be showing you how to create a database for your app, setting up the right PHP variables for different applications, setting up your email server, and more. Also, make sure that you vote on which projects you want to see more tutorials on by going to openappguide.com/vote. In addition, leave any feedback in the comments of this video. This again is Garrett Fry. Thanks for watching.